The last great plague that we know about was the Black Death, the bubonic plague, and it's widely accepted by historians working across, it's not just a kind of Marxist or materialist thing, that the bubonic plague played a pivotal role in the death of the system we know as feudalism. The Black Death hits this fragile system and it changes it fundamentally. It wipes out a third of all people in Europe. And after that, even in a system where wages are not money wages, labor becomes more powerful than the feudal lords. It's no surprise that once the 20 or 30 years after the pandemic is over, so it's still going on, but in smaller waves, you get this amazing rush of revolutionary struggles by workers in cities like the wool workers in Ghent and Florence, and by peasants, as in Britain and France, the so-called Jacquerie in France and the peasant revolt in England, all take place within 20 or 30 years after the end of the Black Death. What can we learn from this? That there are no exogenous crises for social systems. If today we want to talk about, let's only pose it as a hypothesis, a general crisis of capitalism, we are not simply talking about the dysfunctionality of the global model of neoliberalism anymore, although we will come to that. There is strong evidence that the global neoliberal model is falling apart. But we are facing at least two crises that demonstrate the limits of the capacity of this planet to go on sustaining a system called capitalism. Climate change was the problem. The problem of biosecurity is also there. The problem of biodiversity, the rapid extinction of species is also there. Now, to the left and progressive forces in the world, we are used to speaking about these things as if they are dissociated from this other thing which sits in a corner called the crisis of capitalist economic model. I think what the pandemic has demonstrated to me is that they're all now part of the same thing. And the pandemic has hit, as I argue, the capitalist mode of production at an extremely weak point in its evolution. For the first time since probably the early 19th century, since the days of Dickens and Balzac, the capitalists were not required to innovate in order to meet the challenge of worker militancy. If you think about all the introduction of steam to the factory system in the 1820s, Andreas Malm makes this point in his book about climate change, that the introduction of steam was done to defeat male organized workers so that they could automate, so that women could use who were supposed to be weak. They weren't weak, but they were thought of as weak. Women and children could use the machines because steam is there. So we have a 200-year history of innovation is not just driven, Schumpeter also admits this, innovation is never just driven by the desire for profit. It's driven by the challenge of the workers in the workplace. Now, the easiest way to be a capitalist here in ultra neoliberal Britain, if you are a young person who inherits some money, what are you going to do? What you do is you set up an agency, and that agency employs people, and it sells their labor to, well, it could be an automobile factory, it could be a security company, it could be a catering company, it's a hotel. The easiest way to make money is basically, it's like the merchants of the colonial period did. You buy a thing cheap and you sell it dear. Yeah. And the thing is labor. And they could only do that because our organizations were destroyed. The last thing anybody with money thinks about is to innovate, set up a new company, to innovate a technology, to take huge risks, lose everything. There was no need to that when you can make a steady 10% on the dollar or the pound or the euro simply by exploiting cheap labor. And then what? The financial system itself militates. It's a strange concept. It rewards rent seeking. So, in mainstream capitalist theory in the 20th century, rent seeking was always going to be destroyed by competition. But we've evolved this system in response to the stagnant kind of non-innovative nature of neoliberal capitalism. We've evolved a system that in which the really smart thing to do, if I suddenly acquired £100,000, is to basically put it into the finance system and extract economic rent from other capitalists. And the biggest place to put it are the big rent seekers: Google, Amazon, Facebook. Modern capitalism it's becoming stagnant. It's becoming stagnant partly because of the information technology effect of reducing the margin of profit that's possible to extract from the production process. But as it becomes stagnant, what happens is that, and the evidence is there, in one boom bust period after another, the only answer, there is never a new Kondratiev wave, there is never a new takeoff, there is never a new synthesis of the technology and the modernity and the new ideas, never. All you ever get, and we've seen it now in 97, 2001, 2008, and now, is the only answer is the central bank expands the money supply and the state assumes debt. Money is a subtle link between the present and the future, writes Keynes. What I think he meant is that the way money behaves, and the way we behave with money, signals what we think the future is going to be. So we have assembled a debt pile, public, private, corporate, household debt is now 320 trillion. It's headed for, so it's kind of more than 100% of GDP, world GDP. And what that tells us is that we think the future is going to be so profitable, so prosperous, so affluent that debt will be easily paid off. Post-capitalist thesis asserts that in fact there is no value in information technology. There is no hidden value. There is no golden bonanza. Carlota Perez, the Schumpeterian economist, often promises there will be a new golden age. No, it is not coming. What is coming is the possibility of a transition. And what the left needs to do is to begin thinking about the transition on a second dimension beyond climate. It has to be beyond a market scarcity-based economy. A post-capitalist Europe is possible, around the same time as a zero net carbon Europe, in the sense that what is the post-capitalist program? It is suppress monopolies, break them up, impose competition, and create a public realm in information ownership. It is rapidly automate, so you reduce the working day week. You could, with or without the basic income, you could do rapid automation. It is the massive use of open source and network effects, and it is information democracy. That's what I mean by post-capitalism. Without a vision of how you get from today's highly unequal, marketized society in which large corporations are pushing further and further into the interstices of everyday life to commercialize our friendship, our discussion, our dating arrangements. I grew up with analog dating. Now my godchildren do digital dating. So without a vision of something better than that, what are we doing? We're fueling fatalism. We're fueling the idea that nothing better than this is possible. And we're leaving the field for the fascists to say something better than this is possible. Leftism has a strategy for power. The strategy for power in this situation is very difficult because for me, what it means is this, and this is the work I'm doing at the moment within the party and the writing I'm doing, is I think what unites those two sections of the working class is the experience of powerlessness. And what we need to be able to do is develop forms of activism that allow the ex-industrial white worker in a small town and the young black and ethnic minority, lesbian and gay type salaried working class to see each other's powerlessness and to use the party as a venue where they discuss with each other and indeed negotiate what their program is going to be for government.